Hi everybody, it's Patricity. Welcome to my Matrix. Have you heard about Lake Lanier? You know, that haunted place that nobody should swim in or go to. The Lake Lanier that's in Georgia. Well, I'll have you to know that before I knew all about that lake, I went there. When I was in my early 20s, I lived in Georgia and worked at a healthcare facility there. And one of the things we did one weekend was take our residents on a camping trip to guess where? Lake Lanier. Didn't know the history then, but it felt like it was a weird place. I was hesitant about going because we were going to the woods and we were going to camping, and that was not me. You know, back then I was all foo foo and bougie. I probably would say the same thing now, but trust me, it was worse. And I was not about camping, not about going to the woods at all, but it was my employer. So I had to go. So we packed up, and I was not one of the ones that was sleeping in a camper. One of the people had a camper, her own personal camper, and she brought it, and so she slept in it. I was sleeping in a tent with two other employees or coworkers on the ground. So there I was in this tent, Lake Lanier, with our residents. And so, believe it or not, I mean, I was a good swimmer then. I swam in that lake, not knowing it was haunted. I swam in that lake the whole weekend, not knowing it was haunted. The thing, though, that was odd about me being there was that I felt kind of like a weird aura around. Now, this was in Gwinnett County. I lived in Gwinnett County, and also right next to it was Forsyth County. You know, those very racist counties. They still are today, and they were like that back then as well. But I felt weird being in the lake because, you know, lake water is different than the beach. I'm used to the beach because that's where I'm from, the coast. But lake water is different because, granted, there was sand on the bottom, but that green moss, that horrible, weird green moss, which kind of flows through the water everywhere, and it feels like it's tendrils on your feet. And granted, you can see a little bit more than beach water when you walk out, but after a while, you can't see anything. But you can always feel that green sea moss, you know, kind of floating and moving with the waves. I didn't like that. So after swimming a while for a couple of days, I said, you know what? I'm done with the swimming because I couldn't tell what was under there, and it was just kind of weird. So I watched my coworker swim, and I did watch over my residents I was in care of that weekend. But I stopped swimming after probably a day and a half. Still not knowing it was a haunted lake. Still not knowing it was so deadly. So I consider myself lucky that I made it that weekend. Camping was okay. There was not where we were, there was not water. So we had to hike like a mile into the woods at this campground we were staying in or somewhere to get to bathrooms and also showers. And so, you know, we were showering with a whole bunch of other people we didn't know. We didn't know if it was clean or not, but there we were. We were roughing it that weekend. But granted, if I had known what I know now about Lake Lanier, I would never have gone. So today, my advice is not go to Lake Lanier. Now that I know all the things about it, and this is why. Lake Lanier is a deadly place. It has been the site of 675 deaths at least. There's been more than that. But sometimes what happens is when you go in that water, you don't come out. And if and I mean you don't come out, you're not even recovered. Your body is lost forever if it's lost in Lake Lanier. So 675 people have died there. The water is dark, it's murky, because of the seafloor. And when I say seafloor, I really mean forest, because that is a reservoir, and the people who built that reservoir actually flooded out a whole city, land, forest, businesses, homes, graveyards to make that reservoir. So underneath the water, there's almost like a whole city under there. There's graveyards under there, with bodies still there. There's forests under there. And what they did was to make it a little bit safer for boats was, I guess the Corps of Engineers had to go in and top off the tops of the trees so that it would be safe for boating. But underneath there, there's, you know, there's tree stumps. And if you do actually get on the bottom of the floor, you can actually have drop-offs, which are very, very unsafe. So it's just not a place to go. It's not a safe place for boating, not a safe place for swimming. It can actually throw you off course if you're in a boat as well. So, you know, when you think about the history of Lake Lanier, the history is not good. And when I think about the town that it destroyed, way back when, there was a place called Oscarville. It was a black owned area. Lots of black people live there, people of color, and it was a booming place. And so the people around who were Caucasian didn't like that. And there was all sorts of accusations about, of course, someone raped a white woman, and massacres occurred, killings occurred, lynchings occurred. And finally, when they built that reservoir, they decided to just flood out Oscarville, which they did, flood the land, flood the businesses, and they were very wealthy businesses. Even a racetrack is still there underwater. And flood the cemeteries, at least 20 cemeteries. I think they did try to move some of the bodies initially, but 20 cemeteries, you can't move that many bodies. So underneath there's actually, you can see tombstones and graves underneath the water. They're all still there. So the secret as far as what happened in Oscarville with the people that they, there's a lot of racial tension, that they killed and murdered in Oscarville. All of those things have gone down to the murky depths of Lake Lanier. So it actually adds to the haunting and adds to the mystique and the mysteriousness of why that water is so haunted and why you should not get in it. When I think about going there, if I had known all the things I know now, I would never have gone. I mean, I knew about where I lived was a bad place as far as race relations, because we still had, the Klan marching in the city streets. At Christmas time, that big old van would come around playing I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. And of course, they're not talking about snow. So I lived in that area and had to put up with a lot and saw a lot and knew that it was not a safe place for people of color way back then when I was in my 20s, and it hasn't changed. Forsyth County is a place, if you remember, that Oprah went to, right next door to where I live. So same thing. It's not a good place at all. So Lake Lanier, runs through all these places and actually feeds rivers in Georgia, I think another state too, Alabama, and I think Florida, as far as the states that it feeds. So it's a huge area that they actually flooded out to make this reservoir. I believe that there are places on this earth where the curtain between our world and the spirit world is thin. Lake Lanier may be one of those places, and that is why I think the spirit world and bad things are calling out to the living who get in that water, and so many things happen. And the things that are happening are still happening. People are still dying. When I think about the recent things I've heard on the news about Lake Lanier, a couple of Thursdays ago, we're talking in the last couple of weeks, a 19-year-old drowned. He went swimming with friends. He jumped in the water. He went underneath the water and never resurfaced, and they did recover his body. Mother's Day, just this past Mother's Day, there was a boat explosion. There was a boat fueling, I do believe, and somehow that boat exploded, caught on fire. And I think there were some deaths of even little kids and adults in that accident. So bad things are still happening on that lake. And even in April there was a group of people who rented a pontoon boat to go swimming. So they got it in the middle of the lake, and they were on the pontoon, and they decided to jump off and go swimming, which is what you would do typically. And so one person was unable to make it back to the pontoon, so he passed away. They haven't found that person. So his body is lost at the bottom of the lake somewhere. And apparently, there's so many things under the water that, bodies can become entangled in, and you can't get loose. Other people say that there are actually hands coming up from the graves down there, and they're pulling you down and keeping you down in there. You just never know when a place is haunted. But it's definitely an unsafe place as far as swimming and also boating. So many tragedies have happened there. It's not good at all. And there is a legend as well that everybody kind of talks about when you hear about Lake Lanier. My gosh, I didn't know about this legend when I was in it for sure, but it's very interesting. I've heard about this legend. It's called the Lady in Blue. Well, back in 1958, two friends, Sue and Delia, decided to go joyriding. They had a car, and so they stopped at a gas station, and they decided to kind of like, let their fingers do the talking, and they actually did some, I think, a little shoplifting, and got out the door of the gas station without paying. So they were speeding away in their car to get away. Guess what? They lost control and ended up in Lake Lanier. Nobody really knew what happened to them. They were just kind of like gone. Well, 18 months later, a fisherman saw a large bloated body floating in the lake. They fished it out, and it was very decomposed, but they figured it had to be one of the girls from the car. They didn't know quite which one. The thing about the body was that it had no arms, so the arms were gone. So they tried to do testing, and they think it was Delia. So with that, they aren't exactly sure. They never recovered her friend Sue, but they think that when the timing is just right, some people have said they've actually seen a woman in a blue dress with no arms walking on the road where they lost control of the car, and they say that is Delia walking to the lake, because that's where she's lost, and she is forever doomed to stay there and walk that road on the way to the lake, because that's how she died, speeding down that road in her car and went straight into the lake. The other thing people say is that because so many people have died in that lake, and the flooding of Oscarville and the killing of people of color, pretty much, the killing of people of color was almost like a genocide back then. They say that the souls of the dead are underneath the water of that lake, and they are moving in constant flow with the waves. So that is one reason why you should not go to Lake Lanier. My advice, stay away from the lake. Stay out of the water. If you have to go to the lake, don't get in the water. Don't boat. If you have a boating trip, you stay home. But don't get in that water. Don't boat in that water. Maybe camping's okay, like I did on the banks, but don't get in that water. No swimming, not even wading. Don't even go in with your ankles. That's even too far when you think about the spooky things in that lake. Anyway, that's my story about Lake Lanier, and boy, it's a doozy. See you later, alligators. Bye!